Schmitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Altman, I'll start with you. I really enjoyed and was inspired by your story with the light on and the home you grew up in St. Louis, and you talked about the spirit of innovation. That is the spirit of St. Louis. As a fellow St. Louis native, that's a good story to hear. And we just look forward to more investment in St. Louis from your company. That'd be great too. So I'll put a plug in for that. But I do want to ask you specifically, there's a lot made of sort of the comparison between the United States and the regulatory environment and what exists in Europe. What specifically, and I'll open this up to you, what specifically has gone wrong in Europe that we can draw some conclusions from?
First of all, we'd love to figure out how to invest more in St. Louis. I'd love an excuse to get to go home more often. I'll point out one example that I think is just very painful to users. When we launch a new feature or a major new model, we have what is now considered a little bit of like an in-joke, where we say we have this great new thing not available in the EU and a handful of other countries because they have this long process before a model can go out. And there will be, I believe, great models and services that are quite safe and robust that we will be unable to offer in other regulatory regimes. And if you are trying to be competitive in this new world, and if you are consistently some number of months behind what other people in other countries get access to, that's an example that's extremely painful to users.
And you mentioned sort of your observation that the AI stack may get more vertically integrated. So how does that work then? Because right now, the best estimates, I suppose, right, is that, I don't know, China's 2 months to 6 months behind, maybe on large language models. Hopefully some of the advances we're seeing in the US, maybe there's a degree of separation. It's hard to know exactly right with DeepSeek, but then you get down to the chips, and that advantage is more like a couple of years, probably, something like that. So if that's where we're headed, does that increase the US's advantage in your view, or does that sort of allow China to catch up quicker as we get more vertically integrated?
I think there's a lot of things that can increase U.S. leadership, but we touched on this earlier. I think it's so important. There will be great chips made around the world. There will be great models trained around the world. If the United States companies can win on products and the sort of all of the positive feedback loops that come from how you can improve this once real users are using your products in their daily lives for their hardest tasks, that is something special that is not so easy to catch up with just by doing good chips and good models. So making sure that the US can win at the product level here, obviously, I'm like talking my book a little bit, but I really do believe it, is quite important. And that's in addition to all of the chips algorithm, or the infrastructure, algorithms, and data. I think this is a new area where the US is really winning and has a very strong compounding effect.
Thanks. Mr. Intrador, did I pronounce that correctly, by the way?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. I want to turn a little bit, sort of staying on this regulatory environment. One of the things I think that's most concerning that's coming out of Europe is this sort of censorship regime that exists, not just online, but in real life. But certainly it's happening online. I mean, people are being arrested for things that they say online. And one of the concerns I have with AI, I suppose, is that if we end up with a place where it's somehow policing quote unquote misinformation, and I think even in NIST's most recent voluntary standards, one of the risks to be on the lookout for was the spread of misinformation. So the point of the question is, how do we make sure that, I think part of what's going wrong in Europe is it's a sort of it's a funneling information, and in my view, whether I agree with the point of view or not, it ought to be out there. People can make their own decisions. You combat speech you don't agree with, not by censoring it, but with more speech. What are some lessons to be learned there, and make sure that does not happen here?
So Europe is moving forward with its regulatory regime in a European way. And from our seat, where we have to make these enormous capital investments one of the things about the approach that Europe is taking that we are deeply concerned about every day is the balkanization, to use of how they go about allowing information to flow, and how they go about regulating, and how they go about with each component of their union having its own set of rules, which will be tremendously challenging in Europe as time goes on, because it is really hard to make the magnitude of investments that we're doing.
Beyond that, though, jurisdictionally, I'm talking about content now.
Yeah. So we're not the role of our company is really kind of below that.
Yeah.
You know, you know, Sam and you know, Microsoft, you're going to get a lot more attention paid to the content level because of the role that they play in the stack. It's not really where we are primarily focused. We're really focused on the investment side of it.
Yeah. If any of you would like to, Sam, if you, or Mr. Altman, if you would like to respond to that, I'd like to get some answer.
I think, well, first of all, I strongly agree that people getting, you know, like put in jail for stuff they say online is very not American, not what we should be doing. The AI is quite different than social media, at least in its current evolution. People are using these tools in this sort of one-on-one way instead of this massive thing online. So I think it's easy to make too many analogies, but it's a little bit dangerous to try to talk about AI and the things we're going to face here in the same way that we did for social media. But our stance is that we need to give adult users a lot of freedom to use AI in the way that they want to use it, and to trust them to be responsible with the tool. And I know there's increasing pressure in other places around the world, and some in the US, to not do that. But I think this is a tool, and we need to make it a powerful and capable tool. We will, of course, put some guardrails in very wide bounds, but I think we need to give a lot of freedom.
Yeah, I'm out of time, but there's a lot more questions there that we'll follow up with. Thank you, Madam Chair.